How much Bitcoin do you truly need to retire? It's a question a lot of us have probably Googled, maybe late at
Oh,
night.
definitely. That mix of hope and just trying to figure it out.
Exactly. But what if the answer isn't just like a number? What if it's something way more fundamental, changing how we even think about money?
That's really what we're digging into today.
Hmm.
We're looking at this, a really fascinating perspective from Jeff Booth. He wrote Price of Tomorrow. He's a GP at Ego Death Capital.
Right?
And we're drawing from a conversation he had recently on simply Bitcoin. Our mission really is to unpack these pretty radical ideas he has.
Like the infinite purchasing power thing.
Yeah, exactly that. And what a truly free market might actually look like. It's pretty mind-bending stuff.
Okay, let's get into it. So Booth starts with this really provocative claim. He says, a small percentage of a Bitcoin could be enough to, well, live forever.
Sounds almost like science fiction, doesn't it?
It really does. But he backs it up, or tries to, with some pretty big numbers about the global financial system.
Yeah, he dives into the global balance sheet. He talks about roughly $900 trillion in global assets, houses, stocks, bonds, everything.
Like a huge number.
But here's the kicker. Underneath all that,
Yeah.
about $600 trillion in debt. And his point, his really critical point, is that this debt load is, in his words, already insolvent.
Insolvent, meaning it can't actually be paid back under the current rules.
Sort of, yeah. It means the system needs constant growth, constant currency creation, really, just to keep servicing that debt. It's unsustainable without printing more money, basically.
And if that system cracks, if the debt collapses,
Then those $900 trillion in assets, he argues they could become worthless because their value is measured within that potentially broken system.
wow. Okay, so that's the setup. The current system is maybe the house of cards, according to Booth. Where does Bitcoin fit in?
Right, so Bitcoin, he says, is this external force. It's totally different because it exists outside the system. Well, it's bounded by energy, right?
Right.
Its creation and security are tied to actual energy use. That makes its scarcity real, provable, not just decreed by someone.
And decentralized, secure.
Exactly. No central point of control, incredibly hard to shut down or manipulate. And because of that unique position, he argues, it has the potential to reprice that entire system.
Reprice the $900 trillion. How does that calculation work?
So he does this rough math, takes the $900 trillion of, let's call it global purchasing power, and divides it by Bitcoin's hard cap, the 21 million coins that will ever exist.
Okay.
And that comes out to roughly $43 million of purchasing power per Bitcoin in today's dollars, notionally.
43 million per coin. That's a lot.
It is. But then he has this other layer, which is maybe even more important, the idea of a deflationary future.
Deflation meaning prices go down, not up.
Exactly. He argues that in a truly free market, first global free market, enabled by something like Bitcoin, prices will naturally fall every year because of technology. Automation, AI, robotics, just fierce competition, driving efficiency up and costs down. Think about how much cheaper tech gets over time. He thinks that applies to everything eventually.
So that $43 million in purchasing power, it wouldn't just sit there.
No, that's the key. It would gain more and more value forever. That Bitcoin would buy you more stuff next year than this year, and even more the year after, continuously.
So your small percentage of a Bitcoin keeps growing in real terms.
Precisely. You get richer just by holding it because the world is getting more productive around you and prices are falling.
Mr. Booth, it's not if this happens.
It's just the timing of when that happens. That's the big question for him. It really flips the script on what we consider normal economics.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Which leads us straight into his critique of the current system, the fiat system.
Right. We're all taught, inflation is normal, maybe even good, like 2% inflation is the goal.
Yeah, central banks aim for it.
But Booth just flat out says no. The natural state of the free market is deflation. He even puts a number on it. Says it should be deflating at over 5% right now because of technology.
Okay, that's a bold statement. If the natural state is deflation, where does inflation come from then?
He's very clear on this. Inflation only comes from one thing: manipulation of money. Period.
Manipulation by governments? Central banks?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
He points to how our system works. All money is loaned into existence. Every dollar starts as debt, needing interest paid back.
Which means you always need more money in the system tomorrow than there is today, just to cover the interest.
You got it. It mathematically requires inflation, more debt, more money printing just to prevent the whole thing from seizing up, a giant debt spiral.
So when economists say we need inflation,
Booth argues they're looking at it from the perspective of a credit-based economy. They're right within that flawed system, but the system itself is the problem.
And the consequences of constantly needing to inflate, to manipulate.
It demands more and more manipulation of money forever exponentially. That inevitably leads to more centralization, more government control, more coercion.
Because someone has to manage that manipulation.
Right. And the system has to misallocate capital to keep the place spinning, think bailouts, subsidies, that sort of thing.
He suggests looking at things priced in Bitcoin directly.
Yeah, like those priced in Bitcoin websites or charts.
Yeah.
You often see the Bitcoin price of energy or gas or food actually trending down over time, even while the dollar price is going up.
A visual contrast between the two systems.
Exactly. One naturally deflationary, the other artificially inflationary.
Okay, this is a huge vision. Bitcoin repricing the world, leading to deflationary abundance. But you mentioned a catch.
A very important one. Booth stresses this whole potential hinges on Bitcoin staying decentralized and secure.
Which isn't a given.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
He talks about human nature, greed, and fear naturally pushing towards centralization. People wanting safety, convenience, maybe regulations.
So adversaries, governments, powerful groups, they try to co-opt it, create safe, regulated versions.
Absolutely. He worries that many Bitcoiners might even go along with it, maybe unknowingly, moving their coins off self-custody into centralized platforms.
Sacrificing decentralization for ease of use.
Yeah, and that erodes the whole foundation.
So what's the defense? How does Bitcoin resist this pull towards centralization?
Nodes. Running your own Bitcoin node. He emphasizes this massively. Nodes are the gatekeepers. They enforce the rules of the network.
So it's not just about holding Bitcoin. It's about participating and verifying the network.
Yes. He frames it as protecting not just your own wealth, but all of humanity moving into a system of hope, truth, and abundance. It's a big claim, but that's his conviction.
And this leads to what he calls an inevitable clash.
Right. Between the old system of control and this new decentralized system. He says it's been happening over and over and over since Bitcoin appeared.
The systems are incompatible, he says.
Fundamentally, you can't really have both running society side by side indefinitely. He uses this analogy of a giant funnel with, 8 billion people on the planet.
Okay.
And as you go deeper and deeper into Bitcoin, understanding it, using it, running a node, you never go back up because you start seeing the world through that different lens. The two paradigms just don't mesh.
That implies Bitcoin is more than just money then.
Much more. He sees it as a protocol, like TCP/IP for the internet. He even compares where we are now to the internet back in 1969, super early days.
So the base layer is the money, the scarcity, the security. But what else is being built?
Layers on top. Things like the Lightning Network for fast payments, Liquid for side chains, Fediment for community custody, Cashew for privacy, Nostra for decentralized social media.
Building blocks for new applications.
Yeah, he calls it a parallel internet, one that's peer-to-peer, resistant to censorship and control in ways that current internet increasingly is not.
And people can choose to use these parallel systems, opt out of the centralized ones.
That's the idea, opting out of the matrix, so to speak. He gives his own example of leaving X, formerly Twitter, for Nostr.
Why?
He felt X was being hypocritical on free speech, and he recognized the true cost of that centralization, the control points. Nostr offered a decentralized alternative.
Okay, this connects to something really fascinating he discussed. Artificial intelligence. AI under fiat versus AI under Bitcoin.
Yeah, this is a wild tangent, but really thought-provoking. Under the current fiat system, he argues AI is dangerous.
Dangerous. How?
Well, AI makes things vastly more productive, right? Which means fewer jobs needed for the same output. Job displacement.
Okay, that's a common concern.
But in a fiat system where prices are always rising due to inflation, those displaced people, they don't know what to do. They can't afford things, so they turn to the government for help.
But the government, in his view, is creating the problem with the inflation in the first place.
Exactly. It creates dependency on the very system causing the issue.
So how is AI different under a Bitcoin standard?
He argues it becomes safe because AI's productivity gains drive prices down. Natural deflation.
Ah, so if things are getting cheaper and cheaper.
People don't need the job anymore because prices keep falling and falling and falling. The AI creates abundance, and the sound money distributes that abundance to everyone holding it. You get richer just sitting there, basically.
It's a completely different outcome, less need for government intervention.
Massively less. The role of government gets smaller and smaller and smaller because the money works for the people, not against them through inflation.
Which is why he says Bitcoin is terrible for dictators and central planners.
Precisely. Think about the CCP's opposition. Central control relies on controlling the money. Bitcoin takes that away. He uses this analogy of guerrilla warfare.
How does that apply?
You have this super centralized force, like a government trying to control things. But Bitcoin is this decentralized network of hidden nodes. How do men with guns stop thousands, maybe millions, of nodes run anonymously all over the world? It's very difficult, maybe impossible.
It's quite a radical vision. How did Booth himself come to these conclusions? Was he always a Bitcoiner?
Not at all, apparently. He mentioned initially dismissing Bitcoin back in 2011, like many people.
So he wasn't early.
No, he made a small bet in 2017, but it wasn't until 2018, 2019, while he was writing his book, Price of Tomorrow, that it really clicked for him.
What changed?
He said he initially gave Bitcoin only a 5% probability of failure, which sounds optimistic, but then he realized the power of the nodes, how they defended the network. That's when he truly understood its resilience.
That perspective is interesting, especially for people feeling like they've missed the boat on Bitcoin.
Right. He emphasizes we are so crazy early. Even the OGs, people who got in years ago, often felt they were late at the time.
Because the potential user base is everyone.
Basically, yeah, 8 billion people on the planet.
Yeah.
Most are still completely unaware of this potential shift.
So given this view of Bitcoin as almost a separate system, how does he see things like politics and voting in the current system? Is it pointless?
Not entirely pointless, but he puts it in perspective. He acknowledges fiat voting can matter for specific things, like fighting harmful regulations. He mentioned Operation Choke Point 2.0, or the efforts to free Ross Ulbricht.
So tactical battles within the old system?
Exactly. But the strategic power, the real leverage, he says that power comes from us. It comes from people choosing to participate in that said system with their voice, their time, and their money.
Choosing where to put your energy.
Yes. And he makes this really strong point. Money is superordinate to law.
Meaning?
Meaning the nature of your money system underpins everything else. If the money is broken, corrupted by inflation, even things like constitutions can be gradually eroded, chipped away, because the foundation of value itself is warped.
That's a heavy thought. It also suggests Bitcoin isn't really about left versus right politics as we know them.
He argues it's totally incompatible with both, because both current left and right ideologies, he suggests, ultimately rely on manipulating money to fund their projects and promises.
So Bitcoin kind of bypasses that whole debate.
It cuts through all of it. It offers a system where there is no guy, no central control, pulling strings, manipulating the money supply for political ends. It's just math and energy.
It sounds like he sees it as a foundation for a more honest, maybe more hopeful future?
Very much so. He talks about future generations, like a hypothetical Bitcoin native child, someone growing up in this system.
What would be different for them?
They would bathe in the hope and promise of it, he says, learning authenticity, integrity, because they'd see their parents show up in congruence, making the conscious choice to use and protect this new network, this different way of operating.
So pulling it all together, what's the core takeaway from Booth's perspective?
I think it's that Bitcoin isn't just other investment. It's not just digital gold. It's potentially this profound, maybe unstoppable force.
A force imposing a new kind of discipline.
Yeah, a discipline based on sound money, real value, genuine productivity, one that naturally drives prices down and could lead to, well, real abundance, not just for a few, but broadly.
And the key condition is?
As long as it stays decentralized and secure. And this is where I think the message for you, the listener, really comes in. Booth is basically saying, you have a choice.
A choice to engage with this alternative system.
Exactly. To learn about it, maybe run a node, use the layers being built. It's about claiming your own sovereignty, not waiting for permission.
So here's a thought to maybe leave everyone with, building on Booth's ideas.
Okay.
What if the greatest act of liberation isn't really about fighting the old system head on? What if it's simply about building, choosing, and moving your time, your energy, your focus into the new one that just makes the old one obsolete?